Britain has just witnessed a political moment that will be remembered for years. A Prime Minister who entered Downing Street with a huge majority, a promise of national renewal, and the confidence of a party that had fought its way back from defeat, has now stood before the country and announced that he is stepping aside. This was not just another political speech, it was emotional. It was historic. And it opened the door to one of the biggest leadership battles in modern British politics. Keir Starmer, the man who rebuilt Labour and led it back into government after 14 years in opposition, has confirmed that he will resign as leader of the Labour Party. But he is not leaving immediately. He will stay in Downing Street while the party chooses its next leader, meaning Britain is now entering a tense period of political uncertainty. So what really happened? Why did Starmer resign? What does it mean for Labour? And what happens next for the country? Let's break it down. When Keir Starmer became Prime Minister, it was presented as the beginning of a new chapter. Labour had returned to power after more than a decade outside government. The party had promised stability, competence, economic seriousness, and a different style of leadership. For supporters, Starmer was the man who had taken Labour from crisis back to Downing Street. For critics, he was a cautious leader who struggled to turn promises into the kind of visible change people could feel quickly. But no matter what side people stood on, few expected this moment to arrive so soon. Less than 2 years after entering number 10, Starmer has announced that he will leave the leadership of his party. His resignation speech was carefully controlled, but the meaning behind it was impossible to miss. The pressure had become too great. The party had lost confidence in his ability to lead them into the next general election. And once that question was answered inside Labour, Starmer accepted the decision. The scene itself was powerful. A Prime Minister standing outside number 10, reflecting on the journey that brought him there, but also admitting that the journey was now coming to an end. He spoke about the pride he felt when Labour won power. He reminded the country how far the party had come from the difficult years before government. He described the work of changing Labour, rebuilding trust, and trying to make the party acceptable again to voters who had turned away. But this was not a victory speech, this was a resignation speech. The tone was calm, but underneath the calm was the weight of a political career reaching a turning point. Starmer did not present himself as a man forced out angrily. He presented himself as a leader accepting the judgment of his own MPs. That is what made the speech so striking. He was not defeated in a general election. He was not removed by the public. He was brought down by the question every leader fears. Does your own party still believe you can win? This resignation matters because it changes the direction of British politics immediately. When a Prime Minister resigns as party leader, the government does not simply disappear overnight. The country does not automatically go into a general election. Instead, the ruling party chooses a new leader. And because Labour currently holds power, that new leader is expected to become Prime Minister. That means the next person to enter Downing Street may not come through a national vote, but through a Labour leadership contest. For Labour supporters, this may be seen as a chance to reset. For opponents, it may become an argument about legitimacy, mandate, and whether the country should have a say. Either way, the resignation creates a political opening. It gives Labour a new leader, a new message, and possibly a new direction. But it also brings risk. Leadership contests can expose divisions, they can reopen old arguments, and they can remind voters that a party in government is also a party under pressure. The most dramatic part of this story is how quickly the mood changed. Starmer entered office with a powerful majority and a promise to end the chaos of previous years. He wanted to show that government could be serious again. He wanted to restore trust. He wanted to prove that Labour could manage the economy, protect national security, and deliver practical change. But governing is very different from campaigning. Once in office, every promise becomes a test. Every delay becomes a headline. Every unpopular decision becomes a weapon for opponents, and every disappointed supporter becomes part of a growing problem. That is the challenge Starmer faced. He could argue that progress was being made. He could point to policy achievements, investment, public services, and international relationships. But politics is not only about what a leader says has changed, it is also about what people feel has changed. And if voters do not feel the improvement quickly enough, pressure builds. Inside a party, that pressure can become dangerous. MPs begin to worry about their own seats, ministers begin to question the strategy, rivals begin to look stronger, and eventually the leader becomes the story. That is the point Starmer reached. In his speech, Starmer did not simply announce his resignation, he also defended his record. He wanted the public to remember the scale of the task he took on. He spoke about rebuilding Labour after years of internal struggle. He wanted people to see his leadership as part of a bigger mission, not just winning power but changing the country. He highlighted economic growth, wages, investment, infrastructure, public services, workers' rights, renters' rights, defence spending, border issues, child poverty, and Britain's place in the world. That list was not random. It was his attempt to define his legacy before others could define it for him. Because the moment a leader resigns, the battle over their legacy begins. Supporters will say he rescued Labour from disaster and made it electable again. Critics will say he won a huge majority but failed to keep control of the political story. Some will say he was a necessary bridge between Labour's troubled past and its next chapter. Others will say he promised change but could not deliver it quickly enough. That debate will continue long after he leaves Number 10. What made the speech emotional was not only the politics. It was also the personal ending. Starmer thanked colleagues, staff, and the civil service. Then he turned to his family. For any Prime Minister, the job is punishing. It consumes time, energy, privacy, and peace. Every decision is attacked. Every mistake is magnified. Every relationship is placed under pressure. So when Starmer spoke about returning more fully to his role as a husband and father, it gave the speech a personal weight. It reminded viewers that behind the office, behind the title, and behind the political battles, there is still a person who has lived under enormous pressure. That does not remove the political consequences, but it does make the moment more human. A resignation speech is never only about power, it is also about loss, the loss of authority, the loss of a future once imagined, and the end of a chapter that once looked much longer. Now Labour must choose a new leader. That process will decide not only who leads the party but also who is expected to lead the country. This is where the story becomes even more intense. A leadership contest is not just about personalities, it is about direction. Does Labour continue broadly on Starmer's path? Does it move toward a more emotional, populist message? Does it focus on the economy, public services, immigration, housing, or living costs? Does it try to win back voters who feel impatient? Or does it try to hold the centre ground that helped it win power? Every candidate will have to answer one question. Why are you the person who can give Labour a second term? That question matters because Starmer's resignation was built around the idea that the party no longer believed he was the best person to fight the next election. So the next leader will be judged immediately. Not in years, immediately. The public will look for confidence. Markets will look for stability. Opposition parties will look for weakness. And Labour MPs will look for someone who can protect their seats. The danger for Labour is that this resignation may make the government look unstable. After years of voters hearing promises of calm and competence, a sudden leadership change can damage that message. Opponents will argue that Labour is divided. They will say the Prime Minister has lost control. They will ask why the country should trust a government that is changing leaders so soon after a landslide win. That argument will be powerful. But Labour will try to frame the resignation differently. They will say this is an orderly transition. They will argue that Starmer put country before ego. They will say the party is making a difficult decision now so it can govern more strongly later. In politics, the same event can be told two ways. One side will call it collapse. The other side will call it renewal. The next few months will decide which version the public believes. For ordinary people, the biggest question is simple. What changes now? Most people are not thinking about party rules or leadership mechanics. They are thinking about bills, jobs, rent, mortgages, healthcare, schools, safety, and the future. A change of leader can bring a change of tone. It can bring new priorities. It can bring new ministers. It can bring a new relationship with voters. But it can also bring delays, uncertainty, and political distraction. That is why this moment matters beyond Westminster. A Prime Minister's resignation sends a signal through the entire country. It tells businesses, public services, allies, opponents, and voters that the government is entering a transition. And transitions can be opportunities, but they can also be dangerous. The next Labour leader will inherit power but also pressure. They will inherit a majority but also expectations. They will inherit Starmer's achievements but also his problems. And they will have to prove very quickly that this change was not a sign of weakness, but the beginning of a stronger phase of government. So how will Keir Starmer be remembered? That answer is not settled yet. He may be remembered as the leader who saved Labour from political wilderness. He may be remembered as the man who won a historic majority, but could not keep his party united behind him. He may be remembered as a serious figure in a restless political age. Or he may be remembered as a transitional Prime Minister who rebuilt the bridge, but did not get to cross it fully. What is clear is that his resignation marks the end of one political story and the beginning of another. He came to power promising change. Now his own departure has become part of that change. And for Britain, the next question is no longer whether Starmer can lead Labour into the future. That question has been answered. The new question is who comes next, and whether they can keep the country, the party and the government moving forward. Keir Starmer's resignation is more than a personal decision. It is a turning point for Labour. It is a turning point for Downing Street, and it may become a turning point for the whole country. A leader who once stood at the centre of a historic victory is now preparing to hand power to someone else. The speech was controlled, respectful and emotional. But behind it was a brutal political truth. In government, winning power is only the first test. Keeping confidence is the harder one. And today, Britain is watching the start of a new and uncertain chapter. What do you think? Was Starmer right to step aside, or should he have fought on? Leave your thoughts in the comments.